We are back for another series of episodes here on Teaching Music Tomorrow. My name is Victoria Bowler, and I am here with the one and only Anne Molesky. And today we get to talk all about open space, a concept that Anne, you and I probably use every single class in some way, shape, or form. And it's one of those really fundamental things about keeping people safe in our music class that when you have it, it makes everything work really beautifully. And when we don't have it, you know right away. So, talk to me about open space.
So open space is exactly what it sounds like, right? So you have this concept of self space where maybe your students are in an assigned seating chart. So they're sitting on their sit spot or their dot or their carpet square, whatever it might be. And then you have kind of like maybe a movement area of your room, like I do, which is kind of like the open ended place as long as we can stay safe moving in that space. Now, that's a really difficult concept for kids, regardless of age, if they've never had that much freedom before.
Mhm.
We're very
Mhm.
much in um, a world of knowing how to quote unquote school. And a lot of times that means staying in your own self space and you have to walk a very specific way, or you have to do this, that, and the other a very
Mhm.
specific way in order to do it correctly. And I think both you and I don't let me put words in your mouth, have opportunities in our music room where any answer, as long as it's safe, is an acceptable answer. And
Mhm.
so, with that freedom, particularly when we're talking about body awareness and classmate awareness and just awareness, period, can be a really challenging thing for kids when they haven't had the opportunity to do that before. Yes.
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 I'm reminded of like the rules of the road in in America, and then sometimes you go to another country and their rules of the road are just like go where you want to go and figure it out along the way, right? And here it's like
Yes.
you need a turn signal, and not that everybody follows these rules, but like
Mm,
you want your turn signal, and like the whole road is going this way all at once, right? And the classroom equivalent is we're all going to stay in line. We all move the same way at the same time. And even when we do movement activities, oftentimes, not all the time, but oftentimes it's in the context of a folk dance, right? Where we are supposed to
right.
all do the same thing at the same time. We're in our line, we're in our circle with our partner, whatever it is. It's a very structured set of activities. And that's really good because students learn how to move in structure. But then when you take
Mhm.
that away and we put it on the road, as you know, thinking about that analogy, and you have to maneuver around what is the structure now that we're just saying move around the room, and that's the
Mhm.
that's the challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many games, and I'm sure we'll get into this. There's so many activities that you can do in a circle, and then
Mm.
you can also transition them into open space. So if this is a new concept that you haven't explored with any of your grade levels, or if you're like me and you're at a new school and none of the kids have had music the way that you've taught that you teach music before, where they haven't had these freedoms, this might be an accessible way for you to begin to explore this concept of open space.
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you about my real time life experience, which has to do with our conversation that we were having, not all day, every day. But anyway, about my sweet kindergarten class who just like is just really finding their way. Let's put it that way. Finding their way in shared space, their own space, open space, space in the hallway, space in the playground, space in life. These kindergartners are trying to find. Um, and I went to go do an activity with them, thinking that they were ready for it, and it immediately crashed and burned. And so I went back to the drawing table and I thought to myself, how can I scaffold this so that my students can be successful? And for me, there's a couple that I'm thinking of, but one I'm thinking of in particular is Allie Galloo Glee. So if you don't know this game, I'm sure there's many different ways that folks do it, but I sing it this way. Allie Galloo Galloo, Allie Galloo Gally, Allie Galloo Galloo Gally. Woo! And then there's a big vocal exploration at the end. And what I do is I give students scarves to kind of emphasize the whoopee wee part at the end, right? And so we do sort of a rocking motion with our scarves back and forth during the song portion. And then at the end, we toss them and watch them float to the ground. And it's great fun. And we explore our voices and all that good stuff. And this has always been something that I've just like let kids scatter and do as they will with the wind and their scarves and all of the things. And that was not successful right off the bat with this sweets class. And so what I did the last time I taught this game is we did it standing on our spots. And then the next time we did it in a circle. And then the next time, the next class, so these are all different classes. The next class, what I did, because I did want to move into open space and just having the opportunity to do lots of different repetitions of the song, was I had just a couple of students I knew could be successful. And I said, will you four students go find a place to stand in the movement space of our room in 3, 2, 1, you're frozen and your feet have to be frozen, but I want you to move and then toss your scarves just like we've done. And then after the whoop, you have 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and stop. And you're done. And you have a new spot to move. Well, those four could do a really good job. And then I said, oh my goodness, I wonder if I could have 4 more friends show me what that looks like. So this is a lot of existing in open space without moving in open space yet. It's like the moving in the open space is like a transition point to get to the new movement place. And so that was the first thing I had to do, was find a time-bound way for them to move 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and stop. Then their feet were glued again to the floor so that they could do their movement, sing the song, woo, and then go find a new spot and be glued to the floor again, so that they have that time-bound opportunity to move in space without touching their neighbor, without touching the wall, without crashing to the floor, without throwing their scarf on someone's head, like all of the different things, right? And that was a gateway to another game. I'm throwing a lot of stuff at the wall
Yeah, let's
here,
do it.
but another game that I do with kindergarten, the little mice are creeping, which if you don't know, goes like this. The little mice are creeping, creeping, creeping. The little mice are creeping all through the house. The big orange cat is stalking, stalking, stalking. The big orange cat is stalking all through the house. And the mice see the cat, and the mice go squeak. The little mice go scampering, scampering, scampering. The little mice are scampering all through the house. And we talk about what creeping means and stalking means and scampering means. And we practice our short squeak. And it's a small squeak because these are tiny mice, not big mice like on the playground, right? When you scream on the playground. And we practice all of those things. And then we do a similar sequence to where they are practicing tiptoeing on their spots. Then we practice tiptoeing in a circle. Then we practice tiptoeing in open space, finally, and they have to freeze when the cat comes out. And then they can scamper, but we remember that mice, just like that, have teeny tiny squeaks. They have teeny tiny feet, so they can't move fast. And if someone moves too fast, like they have human feet, they have to have a watching turn, right? So it's like all of these little like time-bound transition, moving on open space, doing a stationary activity, then doing something that requires them to have a lot of control to do small movements, not too quickly. And so like now I'm just getting to the point where I feel like we're getting into the gateway of more freedom with open space.
Yes.
So
I
that's kind of
love
my
it.
conglomerate sequence of like giving a little bit of control as time goes on. So.
Well, this is a really good thing to pull out, is that there's not one, I mean sometimes there is, but there doesn't have to be one day you introduce open space and then everybody's walking in open space, because that's not how learning works, right? That's not how development works. We learn something and then we mess up and we take a step back, we watch everybody else do it, and then we try it again, right? And then maybe another class we're going to take another watching turn, because this is just how people learn, right? And these are the parameters that we have around movement, and students have to learn those parameters. Go ahead. You look like you're gonna say
No,
something.
so that's what I was going to say. So for the kid who inevitably will move scampering with human feet as opposed to little mouse feet, right? I say, oh, you need to take a watching turn. And as soon as I say that, he sits right where he his feet, his little mice, human feet were, whatever they were. And he sits down and he just watches for the next one. I said, see how we did tiptoe, stand up. And just like after the next verse, they're back in.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So
Mm-hmm.
give them a chance quickly. It's not like they're out for the rest of the music time, but it's literally a watching turn. Like, look at how your friends were moving their feet. Can you do that with yours? Show me.
Yes. Yes, because this is something that we are trying to develop. So if you sit out and you stop practicing, then you never get the chance to develop this skill of walking in open space, right? Because
Right.
musicians practice skills. Okay, that's one thing that sticks out to me. The other thing, Anne, is that you spent a long time talking about self space is like just where I am. And then you also have shared space, but kind of within that, we have this idea of I can find an open space in the classroom, and that's like a challenge enough, depending on, especially depending on the size of your space. And if you are in teachers' classrooms and like we have desks, right, that's its own thing. But then taking that open space and moving around, and then we get into conversations about pathway and some other stuff around that topic. But it's one thing to find just a stagnant empty space, and it's another thing to have to maneuver with other ensemble members of like what happens when Anne is coming this way and I'm trying to go this way in my open space. Both people have to move, both people have to maneuver that situation. But
Yeah.
you
So
didn't
it's
start
like,
there.
no, exactly. So it's like if you want to put it into a sequence, which we
Right.
all know we love to do here, then it's like I'm moving on my own spot, not moving off of my own spot that I always sit at, right? My own spot that I always sit at.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to move in a circle where I have that like boundary, for lack of a better
Mm-hmm.
term, that shared space
Mm-hmm.
like you were talking about. Then I'm going to move into an open space stationary, and then I can move in that open space.
Well, it is very interesting that you should mention that that is the sequence. Let's do you have anything else that you want to throw on this? I feel like we could talk about this for a lot longer. I feel like there's a lot more that we could say about this because
Yeah.
I like this a lot. Um, the very last thing that I want to pull from yours is along the lines of having it be like an emergent process. You're
Mm-hmm.
not doing this all in one class. So you started with something that maybe, would have been successful in a different situation. That day it wasn't. And this is another conversation that we have about like when to push ahead and when to pivot to something else. That's another conversation that we had. But you scaffolded it back and then you add like a little step over time. I just think that's really, really, really valuable. I think that's huge.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I had enough kids in this group that I knew that even going to just an open space, they wouldn't have the self control to stay still when it was time to stay or not move their feet anyway and be able to follow directions, let's put it that way, until they saw other kids doing it. Right. The description of me saying, but then you can't, this is what we're going to do. They had to
Mm-hmm.
see it happen. So it was easier for me to say, oh, I want these 4 mice or whatever it was to go and stand. Or it wasn't the mice, it was Allie Galloo. But anyway,
Mm-hmm.
to go stand and then we'll add to it.
Yes.
And that saved a lot of time in the long run because they could just see it and know what it was supposed to look like.
Yep.
So,
Yep. Okay, well, let's
well,
zoom up a couple grade levels. Let's imagine that we are in somewhere between second, third grade-ish, just depends. And let's walk in a circle while we sing. Ickle, ockle, blue bottle, fishes in the sea. If you want a partner, please pick me. And at the end of the song, students are going to find a partner. There's a separate activity, but you're going to find a partner who is not your immediate shoulder neighbor. You're going to find someone, and I have questions on the board for students to answer, such as what's the lowest pitch in this song? How many steady beats are in this song? What is this song about? What game could we use with this song? Is it like just one way that we can teach a song, which is, and probably another episode that we could have. Okay, so we're walking in a circle. Ickle, ockle, blue bottle, fishes in the sea. If you want a partner, please pick me. And you find a different partner. You have another question on the board to answer. Then we're going to add the melodic contour. So as we are moving in our circle, we're going to move up and down to the melodic contour. And eventually we're going to stop and put our fingers on the ground because that's our lowest pitch of the song. So we're moving in a circle all together. And we're showing the melodic contour. And then we touch the ground. Next, we're going to move. Instead of being in this circle, we're going to take this on the road. But now we are all in one big line, one big school of fish. So the teacher, I am leading us in our, like a zigzag windy path around the classroom while we do the same exact thing. So we're still showing the melodic contour as we move. And when the song is over, we touch the ground. This time, next next iteration of this is students are walking around the room on their own. This is not the first time I introduce open space. This is like second, third grade-ish. So we already know about open space, but we're thinking about fish in the water. And between me and the other fish in this classroom, there's always water between us. So actually, as we move, we're not looking for other people. We're actually looking for empty air, or in this case, empty water. We're looking for negative space. So keep lots of water in between you and someone around you as we all sing, Ickle Ockle blue bottle fish, and touch the ground at the end. Great. Next, if we are successful there, I can have students get into, we were pairing people together earlier. So I'm going to have them pair again with someone else. Now, one fish is like the leader fish and the other fish is in their one little school. So we have a school of 2 fish and they're moving around, still following the melodic contour. And then we touch the ground. Okay, so now if that's good, we can have the group of 2 turn into a group of 4. So now we have a school of 4 fish and we're doing the same thing. And that is where I would stop, unless you have like a lot of open space and you have like physical empty space in your classroom, and unless you have like maybe a small class with a lot of self-control. That's a great place to stop for like second and third. But this is a sequence that we were moving in a circle first, and since it's not students' first experience with open space, then we're moving around in the water and I'm just in charge of myself. And then the fish in front, in the next iteration of the game, the head fish in front needs to be aware for the entire school. So where can we go where there is open space? And that's going to work. And then in this concept plan, when I was writing it down, it can be that students stand in place and you just show the melodic contour like with your elbow, then your elbow goes on the floor, right? Or your nose, and then your nose goes on the floor. It's like you can scaffold it back. This is what you were saying. You can scaffold it back, but when you get to scaffold it forward, boy, oh boy, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. So I love all of it, but 2 things are really sticking out to me about water and the type of vibe, for lack of a better word coming to my brain right now, that gives off, and also just this like really intentional focus on negative space. It's making me think about how this idea of negative space and thinking about the water and you don't want to run into another fish, like that type of language around the visual versus like just find a spot where nobody else is, make sure you're not running into each other. It's such a different feeling for those students than the latter, right? So I love that. I love that idea of negative space because I mean I still have 3rd graders who are like just purposely running into each other's shoulders when we're doing games in open space, just because like when we're doing Sasha and they have to find a new partner, right? And so I think having a practice moment like this where you're thinking about it is really, really great. And also the fact is that you said it's not the first experience with open space. So they're doing all these other musical things while still incorporating and practicing that skill that you can use for other things as well, in terms of looking for negative space and thinking about the way that you're moving through the room and how you're leading your mini school or ensemble, which is another term that you use a lot, through the space and interacting with other people. So it just makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing that you mentioned before about how like having a watching turn sometimes, and I didn't mention this, but sometimes like you're just going to be, if you are a 3rd grader who just like really needs that, like you need to like push your body into someone else, like to feel alive,
Right.
on a Tuesday.
Right.
And I get it, right? If that's you and like this is going to be a little bit too much, you're still participating. You can still
Mm.
participate and do the melodic contour, but you are now a piece of seaweed right here, and everybody else is moving around you, but you're the anchor point. Like you don't move. You're your own little happy piece of seaweed, you know?
And that's actually a really great skill because not only are they looking out for the other fish that are moving, they also have to navigate around this seaweed.
There's some stationary seaweed planted. Yes. Yeah, and then, again, back to the idea of scaffolding back. Maybe it's find an empty spot on the ocean floor and the whole class, we are
Mm,
all seaweed now. And so
mm.
that's scaffolding back to finding an open space, but we're not moving around the room yet.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. And I think it's okay. And again, going back to the conversation we had about pushing versus pivoting, I think it's really okay to like try something and realize very quickly that it's not going the direction that it needs to, and taking a minute and thinking to yourself, okay, this is the scaffold they need, even if it's different than what's on your plan, right?
For sure.
This is
For
something
sure.
that we've been talking about a lot lately.
Definitely. Definitely.
So, yeah.
And we've talked about some activities. We haven't talked about how we introduce open space
Mm.
explicitly. So I wonder if you want to like walk and stop or anything like that.
That's what I use for everything.
I know.
So I think that yeah, I mean, there's nothing else to say except like playing Ella Jenkins Stop and Go, or I call it Walk and Stop, and that's really called Stop and Go, I guess. Which is just simply, I'm gonna walk and a walk and a walk and a stop, da-da-da-da-ba-ba-ba, over and over and over and over again. Is one of those things that is really basic and is like a glorified freeze dance that gives
Hmm.
students a chance to feel what it looks like in open space. Um, this was really effective to me. So again, I started at a school this year who had not had music at all in the style that I teach. Um, they hadn't done a whole lot of singing or a lot of movement at all. And so even with my older kids, the way that I turned it into something that they wanted to play is we turned it into an elimination
Oh
style
yeah.
game, right? And so as I sing, I'm gonna walk and a walk and a walk and a stop, they have to freeze. And if they move at all, or they touch somebody, or they crash to the floor, then they are automatically out, right? And then you make the motions harder, like hop, 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 and hop on one foot and
Hmm.
stop. And then you switch up the tempo, hop it, 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 stop, right? And then just try to trick them and do all those little things. And so they're really listening and they're really aware of their body because they don't want to be
Hmm.
the one who's out. So it's just
Hmm.
kind of like a little tricky way to get them to really focus in on what it means to move in open space with people going in all different directions. And I encourage them not to move in a circle. I don't want them moving in a circle in an activity like that.
Hmm. Yeah, it's fun. Like if you go to a workshop or something where it's like an open space activity and then we just kind of like merge into a
Right.
circle. It's hard to get out of.
Yeah.
Yes, I love that. And that's a great reminder that like the little kids songs, these aren't actually little kids songs. These are just songs, right? And you can use it with first grade, or you can level it up and use it with your, upper grades as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then with something like that, you can also start stationary just on your spot. Like,
Yes.
and I'm just gonna step and a step and a step and a stop, and that's it, right? And we're still responding to the movement. But then what I like about this song, and I saw another teacher do this when I was in college, we watched you go and you watch well, you know all about this, Anne,
Sure.
you teach.
Yeah.
So I watched a teacher do this, and it got implanted in my heart, and I was like, that's brilliant.
Sure.
But when she's doing it, she was just, I'm gonna walk and stop. I'm gonna walk and a 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 walk and a
Yeah,
stop.
exactly.
And you
Exactly.
kind of you elongate it, or then if it's getting out of control, I'm gonna tiptoe and a stop, and tiptoe and a stop, and tiptoe and a tiptoe and a stop. Right,
Or
and so you
even
get to
stop and a stop, stop,
right.
stop. Yeah.
Yeah, so then you can be kind of the orchestrator of like when students are ready for a little bit more of an elongated phrase, you give it to them. And when they're not ready, you don't give it to them.
Right,
You know,
exactly.
that's it.
Exactly. Adapt it so that just because the song goes a certain way doesn't mean that's the way it goes, quote unquote, a certain way
Yes.
doesn't mean that's how it has to live in your classroom. And I think that's an important piece of advice for any activity. So like we started, and I was talking about how you can take most like circle activities, probably, maybe, or some of them at least, let's say it
Yeah.
that way, and turn it into an open space activity. So for me, like even 7 jumps, I always do in a circle, but that's
Uh-huh.
a fun one to do in open space, if you want to give
That's
it a
such a
whirl.
good
So
idea.
so yeah. But anyway,
I love that.
so closing thoughts before we wrap up here. So this idea that open space is a concept that transcends age group, right?
Yeah.
Even if you've never done kind of an open space movement activity with your older students, there's ways to make that happen. I think you've heard lots of good examples from both of us here. And then to think about the sequence that you want to use, but also remember that there's probably a lot of steps that you can scale back one if you need to, like our stationary seaweed, right? But this
Mm-hmm.
idea that we're going to focus on safe movement in our own space, safe movement in a shared space, and then perhaps finally into that open space.
You nailed it. That's it.